Hey folks, in this video we are going to be discussing one way to manage the 50 email limit when trying to send emails using Google Apps Script. Now, there's a caveat to this video in that there are quotas that Google has for the amount of emails that you can send using Apps Script. So depending upon the plan that you're using, you will still have a limit on the amount of emails that you can send in one day using AppScript. But this solution is one way for you to attempt to manage that issue so that you can send more than 50 at one time. So the structure of this video is that I am going to demo the general outline of the script and the logic so that you have a sense of what you would be getting into. And then we're going to write this from scratch. So what you're looking at here is a set of logic that will segment your mailing list into 50 email increments. So what will happen is we're going to set a certain amount of emails here, and then we are going to construct grouping logic that is going to bucket the emails into groups of 50. That way you can just run the script once and you'll have a programmatic solution in order to send out an email to more than 50 email addresses at one time. So you can see when I open up my execution log here, I have 90 email addresses. They have been batched into groups of 2. The first group is 1 through 50. The second group begins at 51 and goes up to 90. Now, if you wanted to, it can go on forever. So you'll see here, I increase the amount to 120. This is just a loop that is generating emails. So if I run that again, you can see I now have 3 groups where we are going from 51 to 100, and then we're starting over again at 101, all the way up to 120. So, what'll happen is you'll have 3 emails sent using one script. So you only have to push the button once, you can automate it to run once, and then it will send out in groups of 50. Now, as I mentioned before, there are quota limitations. So you're going to want to reference the developer's quota list here, which will outline how many quotas you have. So I'm working on the free edition of G Suite, which means that I have the ability to send 100 emails per day using Google Apps Script. So when I was developing this script, I reached my quota limit because I started at like 120 and I could only send 100. So then I started getting errors and I was locked out. I don't have a workaround for that. If you do, feel free to leave it in the description. Now, if you're working in a Google workspace, you'll have the ability to send an email to 1,500 recipients per day, and you can send 2,000 within the domain. So if you work at youtube.com, you can send 2,000 email. You can have 2,000 email recipients per day using this application. So what I would recommend is that you follow this tutorial to get a sense of how to construct this logic, because you don't want to max out your quotas in the development phase, and you also don't want to send emails out to a bunch of people while you're developing. So the way that we are going to create a sandbox environment is with this first portion of the code here. So you can see I'm using my name, and then I'm using a plus symbol here, and then I am using a for loop in order to generate a number. And the result of that is this set of emails where it's all my email address, but there's a plus symbol there. So this is a fun trick that I picked up, last year or a couple months ago. I can't remember when. But basically, you can create aliases of your email. So that's what's happening here. I'm creating an alias where it's just my email plus 1, which is how I develop for email. So that's what I would encourage you to do. That way you're not sending out emails to a bunch of people. You're just sending it to yourself, and you'll get the emails without having to go external, and then you can kind of see where your quotas are. So that's what this logic is here, and then the rest of this is going to be creating groups and making sure that we have groups of 50 relative to the amount of emails that we're sending. Cool, so with that out of the way, we are going to build this from scratch. So I would recommend that you go to Google Drive and you create a project folder. As you get deeper into programming logic, file pathing and directory logic is an exceptionally helpful tool to establish logical relationships within your scripts. And having folders with quote unquote assets is a really good way to get there. So in my mind, assets are anything from images to spreadsheets to documents. And having them organized in a way where you can programmatically reference them is a huge benefit. And the simplest way of saying that is maintain folders. If you maintain organized folders, your projects are going to get sophisticated very quickly. So we're going to go up to the new menu, go to more, and then we're going to open up Google Apps Script. This project is going to be an unbounded script. You can use a bound script, which means that it comes from Google Sheets or Google Documents or Google Slides. But given that I've crafted this as a development project, I just want you to work, or I would recommend you work out your logic in this sandbox rather than using it in your production environment. So we're going to change our project to email more than 50 addresses. And we're just going to keep the my function logic here because it really doesn't matter. We're going to click to the right of the opening curly bracket and we're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit 2 slashes so that we can add a comment. And the first thing that we're going to do is create an empty array to collect values. And the values that we're going to be collecting are the email aliases. So I'm going to call this array collector, and I'm going to set it equal to empty square brackets. I'm going to add a semicolon there. That's how you create an array that you can push values into. I'm going to hit enter twice. I'm going to hit the left arrow twice. I'm going to add 2 more slashes for another comment, and I am going to run a loop to generate the email aliases. I'm going to hit enter, I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to use a for loop. I'm going to use var, and my variable is going to be I, which is short for iterator, and I'm going to set it equal to 1. I'm going to use a semicolon, and I'm going to say I less than equal to, and then I'm going to start with 75. And then I'm going to add another semicolon, hit space, I plus plus. Go to the right of your parentheses, hit space, open up a curly bracket, and hit enter. Now I'm going to take a moment here just to kind of explain what we did there. When we say for var I is equal to 1, we are establishing a variable of I. Your variable can be called whatever you want to. It is, typically the way that I've always seen for loops structured is that the variable is I because I presume it's short for iterator. And that's what our for loop is going to be doing. It's going to be iterating through, a set of values or a certain amount of values or a certain amount of time. So because we don't have values that we want to iterate through, we are using syntax that will enable us to establish the amount of iterations that we want to make. That's where the second portion of our logic is stating variable I less than 75. So we're saying I is going to be equal to 1. That means that the first point of our iteration is going to be 1. In that second portion, we are establishing that we want the loop to continue until I is equal to or less than 75. So that means that we will go from 1 all the way through 75. And the reason that we're going to go 1 through 75 is because of the third portion of our code where we are establishing I++. That means that we are going to positively iterate. So we will go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, so on. If you wanted to go backwards for any reason, you could also do I minus minus, and you will iterate in the opposite direction. Cool. So the reason that I decided to establish I as 1 or to set I to 1 is because for loops will they are zero indexed by nature. So that means that the first value will be 0 if you do not establish a different value. So if I ran for I in 75 or in length 75 or whatever the logic is that we would need to do it, it would start at 0 and go to 75, which means that we would have 76 values technically, because we would have 0 to 75, 0 being 1, 1 being 2, 3 so on and so forth. So we are establishing I as 1 so that our first email alias is going to be email plus 1, and the last one will be email plus 75. That'll just make it easier for us to error correct when we're thinking about how many emails we want to send in one group, which in this case is 50. Cool. So with all that out of the way, we are going to create the email addresses. So we're going to hit enter and then tab, and then we are going to push the values into our array collector. So we're going to reference array collector. We're going to use dot push, and then we're going to use open parentheses. We're going to use square brackets because we want to push a list into our array collector, or we want to push an array into our array collector. I'll explain more in a little bit. So we're going to use single quotes, and then you're going to use your email address. So I'm going to do mapbrigidi.dev, and then I'm going to use a plus symbol. I'm going to go to the right of my single quote. I'm going to use a plus sign. And then I am going to type in capital N number. I'm going to use an open parentheses, and I'm going to pass I. I'm going to go right to the right of the parentheses. I'm going to use a plus symbol, and then I'm going to use single quotes, and I'm going to type in @gmail.com. So again, this is whatever you want your email address to be, right? So enter your email address here, use a plus symbol. Make sure that your email address, or the beginning of it before the @ symbol, is within a single quote or a double quote, doesn't matter. Then you're going to use a plus. You're going to have number with capital N, open parentheses that has an I in between them, and then you're going to use plus string, so single quote or double quote, at whatever your email domain is. So what we're doing here is the plus symbols, because we have two strings, which is the first part of our email address, and then the domain portion of our email address, is being concatenated with a number representation of our iterations. So that means that we are going to be iterating values that will be added in between these strings. Now, it won't be added mathematically, but it will be added using our concatenation here, which is what these plus symbols are doing. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to add in some logging. You don't have to do that. If you do have errors, logging is a really good way to kind of see what's going on. So if you do want the logging, go to the right of your parentheses, hit enter, add 2 slashes, and then say logging to check accuracy, or whatever you want to. You can just say logging. Hit tab and do logger.log, and then let's just log I. That way you can see all the times that it runs. You're going to hit the down arrow once, you're going to hit enter twice, you're going to hit the left arrow twice, and then you're going to enter 2 slashes. And then we are going to add another comment that will say log the array collector. Hit enter, tab, and then we are going to do logger.log, and then we are going to pass in array collector. We're going to go to the right, we're going to use a semicolon. We are going to hit save. Once you hit save, my function, or whatever you call your function, should pop up here, which means that you can now run it. We're going to run our logic. And what we're going to want to see is a bunch of numbers pop up in here. And then we want to see our result, which should be 75 instances of our email address. So you can see our logging is quite vast. So let's start at the bottom first. You can see that we've successfully created a two-dimensional array. The reason that we know it's two-dimensional is because we have two square brackets at the beginning and two square brackets at the end. The first square bracket represents the empty array that is part of the array collector variable. The second set of square brackets is for each instance of our email alias. So this is a two-dimensional array, which is also known as a list of lists. The reason that we want to build a list of lists is because once you push your code into production, meaning once you start trying to extract values from a Google Sheet, this is how the values are going to be structured. So each row or cell, depending upon how you collect the data from Sheets, is going to be within a list. And they will be structured within a list of lists, which is a two-dimensional array. Two-dimensional arrays are composed of two dimensions. The first dimension is the list, and the second dimension is the value within the list. So this highlighted value right here is list 1, and it only has one value within the list. I have a couple videos that touch on this more, so if you're curious, reach out or go to my channel page and you can learn more about this. But this is why and how you can tell what type of data structure you're working with. And then, we can go back and you can see that our iteration is working as expected, where the first value is 1 and the last value is 75. So this is a perfect way for us to test our email logic, because now we have a set of data to work with. Cool. So what we're going to do now is we can remove this portion of our code here. We don't need logger.log array collector, and we don't need that comment that says log the array collector, but we are going to have a comment. So I'm going to delete that, but you can see I still have my double slashes there. And we are going to create a group variable. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and then we're going to use var, and we are going to call it grouper. You can call it whatever you want to. I just called it grouper because I had no better ideas. So grouper is going to be set equal to capital M math dot seal, which I believe stands for ceiling. And then we are going to pass in our array collector, and we are going to divide it by 50. We are going to hit enter, and then we are going to use logger.log, and we are going to log out our grouper variable. So what's happening here is we are going to be dividing the results of our array collector by 50, because we can only send 50 email addresses at one time. And we're using math.ceiling because we want to round up to ensure that we always have enough spots in our group for the number of emails that we have. So for example, we have 75 emails that are being generated right now, which means we require 2 groups. So we're going to divide our array collector by 50 to figure out how many groups we need, and then math.ceiling is going to round it up so that it says 2 instead of whatever 75 divided by 50 is. Sorry, I'm not good at math. So we're going to run this function now, and now you can see that we are getting a NaN value in here, which is not what we want. My apologies. I saw what I did here. We cannot divide array collector by 50. We have to divide array collector by its length. So basically we need to extract the value of how many values are in array collector. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to, we'll just leave it like this because you'll just see what happens. We are going to go back into our for loop up here, and we are going to remove the logging for our accuracy because we don't need it. And I don't like how when I ran this, you can see all these numbers here that obfuscated where we're actually at in our development. So just to kind of reset where we're at, we had an error in here. Array collector divided by 50 is the incorrect way of running this math function because we weren't actually passing a numerical value for math to be done on. So when we do array collector dot length, we will get the value 75, which we can then divide by 50, which should then result in a correct implementation of our grouper variable. We also deleted logging in our for loop because we just don't want to see it anymore. So with that out of the way, we're going to try and run again, and now we should get 2. Perfect. So you'll see that this is a dynamic function. If we change this to be 35, you don't have to do this, but you can if you want to, we should just get 1. And then if we change this to be 1,000 or 150, we should get, what is that, 3? Yep. So you can see that it figures out dynamically how many groups we're going to need. And we're going to need that grouper function as we move into the next step of our code. So we're going to add double slashes in here. And we are going to write a comment that says empty array to collect emails and group numbers. So we're going to hit enter and tab. And we are going to create a variable called email array that is going to be set equal to square brackets. So we're going to basically be doing the same thing that we did in the first portion of our code, where we are going to be pushing values into an array. So we're going to hit enter twice, left arrow twice, 2 slashes, and then we are going to create loop logic to tag groups of 50. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to use a for loop. We're going to have empty parentheses, and we are going to declare var I is equal to 0. We're going to use semicolons, and we are going to use I, which is less than or equal to our grouper variable. We're going to use semicolon, we're going to hit space, and we are going to iterate positively, so we're going to do I++. So you can see in this instance, we have declared var I as 0 because we are going to start at 0. And we are going to be dynamically deciding how long our iterations will run based upon the results of our grouper variable, which is coming from our email alias creator loop. So, we'll keep it at 150 for now. We're going to go to the right of our parentheses. We're going to hit space. We're going to use a curly bracket, and we're going to hit enter. We are going to add 2 slashes for another comment, and we are going to establish the group ceiling. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we are going to declare a variable called group ceiling, and we're going to set it equal to I times or star asterisk, whatever you want to call it, 50. So this is going to help us dynamically establish what the ceiling for each group is based upon the iterations that we get from grouper. We're going to use a semicolon. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit left arrow twice, and we're going to add 2 more slashes, and we are going to establish the group floor. We're going to hit enter, tab, and we're going to declare a variable called group floor. And we're going to set that equal to open parentheses, group ceiling, and then we're going to go to the right of the parentheses, hit space, add in a minus sign, and now we're going to subtract 50. So this is a little bit ambiguous right now because we are referencing several variables and we're using lots of math. So what I'm going to do now is hit enter, hit the left arrow twice, I'm going to add in a comment, and I'm going to say logging out the variables. So you can do this if you want to. I'm going to hit enter, tab, and then I'm going to type logger.log, and I am going to say single quote, this is the group floor, and then I'm going to go to the right of, or you know what, before that, I'm going to add a colon next to floor, space, go to the right of the parentheses, space, plus sign, and then I'm going to type in group floor. I'm going to go to the right of my parentheses, hit enter, and then I'm going to type logger.log, and I'm going to use single quotes, and I'm going to say this is the group ceiling colon space, and I'm going to go to the right of the single quote, I'm going to use the plus sign, and I'm going to say group ceiling. So the reason that I did that is because I want to add some logging in here so that you get a tangible sense of what you just told the computer to do. I'm going to hit enter a couple times just so that my screen is a little bit more visible, because right now what we are doing is just using the grouper function. So before I run it, I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and I want to give you a chance to take a screenshot if you want to, or you can pause the video so that you can see if your code lines up with mine. I'm going to run this code and then talk through what's happening in here, and then I'm going to scroll down. So I just want to give you plenty of time in the event that you have any errors or you want to look at anything that I've been doing. So I'm going to run this code now so that we can see what our results are. So you can see that we are dynamically calculating floor and ceiling at various points. So you can see that our first instance is 0, which means that our floor is going to be negative 50. You can see our second instance starts at 0, and the ceiling is 50. 50, 100, 100, 150. Why is that happening? Well, we have established that we want to create 150 email aliases, which is resulting in the array collector having 150 values. Those 150 values are being referenced in array collector.length, which is being divided by 50, and then through math.ceiling is resulting in the result of 150 divided by 50, which in this case is 3. We have established an email array, which we are not using. So right now, this doesn't matter for what just happened in our execution log. We are using a for loop, which is going to programmatically reference our grouper function and then establish groups of 50. And the way that we're going to use that is by establishing the group ceiling function, which is going to multiply I times 50, and the group floor, which is going to subtract the group ceiling by 50. So we're starting our for loop at var I is equal to 0. So that means that the very first time that this loop runs, 0 is going to be multiplied by 50, which creates 0. That group ceiling of 0 is going to be subtracted by 50, which is going to create 150. The next run of the loop is going to be the value of 1. So when we multiply 1 by 50, we get 50 as our ceiling. Our ceiling is then subtracted by 50, which gets us 0. That's why in our execution log, you can see that the first pairing of floor and ceiling results in a ceiling of 0, which is I times 0. And our floor, which is 0 minus 50, gives us negative 50. And the next instance here is group floor of 0 and group ceiling of 50. Cool. So we are going to move forward, and honestly what we might be able to do in here is we could use 1 so that we don't have that negative instance in here, right? So we can run this now with 1 and see if that's a little bit better. And we end up getting 0, 50, 50, 100, 100, 150. So that actually might be a better use of this for us, is establishing that var 1 or var I is equal to 1. Cool. So with that out of the way, I am going to remove this logging here because we don't need it. And the next thing that we are going to do is create an array for collecting groups. So we're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab, and we're going to do var group array, and we're going to set that equal to an empty square bracket. We're going to hit enter, left arrow twice, hit enter one more time, and then we're going to add in another set of slashes so that we can establish a loop through the array collector to tag the emails with a group number. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to use for. And because we're within a for loop, we're going to use a different variable. So we're going to use for_j in array collector. And the reason that we're doing for_j in array collector is because arrays are 0 indexed. So that means that the first value in an array is 0. So if we establish j as 1, then we are going to actually be starting with our second email alias, which we don't want to do. So we are going to use curly brackets. We're going to hit enter. We're going to establish conditional logic, which says if j is less than the group ceiling, double ampersand, which stands for and, j is greater than or equal to the group floor, go to the right of your parentheses, hit space, add in curly brackets, hit enter, double slash for a comment. If those parameters are met, send groups to the array. Hit enter, tab, and then type group array dot push, open parentheses, array collector, square bracket, j. Go to the right of your parentheses, enter in a semicolon. Hit the down arrow once, hit the down arrow twice, and now we're out of the j for loop. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow once, and we are going to add double quotes for now. And we're just going to, for now, we're going to type push email array to the group array. But before we do that, I want you to hit enter and tab, and we're going to do logger.log, and we are going to log out the group array. Now, I just want to make sure that the group array is doing what we want it to. In my notes for this lesson plan, I established var I is equal to 0. So given that I've now changed it to 1, I just want to make sure that there's no issue with the iterations. I want us to see that everything that we want to push into the group array is being collected. And the way that we'll do that is by adding in some logging to make sure that our logic checks out. So we are going to run our code, and it looks great. So you can see that we are starting at 1, and we have 50. Our next group is 51 to 100, and our third group is 101 through 150. So that checks out. That's great. We are now going to push our email or our grouper array to our email array. So what we can do is just highlight logger.log, and we can just type over it. We're going to type email array dot push, and we can go to the right of our group array, and we can to our email array.push, hit the down arrow once, hit the down arrow twice, hit enter once, hit tab once, add in comment, and say log out the email array. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we are going to type logger.log, and then we are going to look at that email array. So what we're going to want to see here is we're going to see we want to see like if this creates our groups into arrays that we can loop through. So I'll explain it once we see it, but we're going to run our code again, and that's looking pretty good. What's looking pretty good is that we have 3 square brackets at the beginning of our logging. And what we're seeing here is 2 square brackets here that are correlated to 2 square brackets here. So that means that we've established an array of 2-dimensional arrays. So this square bracket here and this square bracket down here is the email array. That's this square bracket up here. When we see these 2 square brackets here, this square bracket is connected to this square bracket here. And it's a little bit difficult to see because of how much data we have in here. But you can, if you just kind of scan your eyes over this section of the logging, you can see that we have single brackets throughout the section. That's an indication that this is doing what we want it to do. Now, because we know that we are intentionally creating groups of 50 here, when we see these 2 square brackets after number 50, that's indicating to us that we have a 2-dimensional array of our first 50 email addresses. Another really strong indication is that with email 51, you can see that we have another set of square brackets here. And then if we scroll down or just look down to email 100, you can see that that also has square brackets. So let me see if I can highlight 2 things at once. No, I can't. Okay. So we're seeing, again, if we just kind of scan our eyes over this portion of data here, you can see that there's all single brackets until we get to email 100, and then we have double brackets. So this is indicating that we have 2 groups of 2-dimensional arrays, or we have 2 sets of 2-dimensional arrays. And then finally, you can see at 101, we have 2 square brackets, and then we have 2 square brackets after 150, and then we have our email array square bracket to end it off. This is an indication that our code is going to work in that we have 3 2-dimensional arrays within an array, which means that we are going to be able to iterate through the email array and get increments of 50 because of the way that we've repackaged our data. Cool. So I'm going to leave everything up here from the email array portion. We did a lot of math, and there's a lot of kind of wonky, unintuitive symbols in here. So if you want to pause the video or take a screenshot, I'd recommend doing that now so that you can check out your code. This language, Google Apps Script, it is case sensitive. So if you are missing, if you have extra curly brackets or extra parentheses, or things are not referenced correctly, it won't work. Everything that you're looking at on the screen, with the exception of logger.log, is variable dependent. So like, for example, just so that my syntax matches the environment, I'm using group and then capitalizing ceiling. It doesn't matter if you do that. I would just recommend that you do that, because if you give your code to somebody else, they can read it more easily, because that's the way that the syntax of this environment works. But once you're ready, we're going to move on to the final portion of the code, where we are going to establish a loop using our email array, and then we're going to try and send some emails. Cool. So before we do that, I am going to decrease my amount so that it is 65, because I only have 100 emails to work with. I don't want to forget that and then send an email and then not have the opportunities to send any more. So what we're going to do now is remove the log out the email array and the logger.log. You can keep it if you want to. I don't want to, so I'm going to remove it. And I am going to add a comment that says loop for sending the emails in groups of 50. I'm going to hit enter, I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to do for parentheses I in email array. I'm going to go to the right of my parentheses. I'm going to hit space. I'm going to open up curly brackets. I am going to hit enter, and then I am going to do logger dot log, and then I'm going to log out email array square bracket I. I'm going to go to the right of that and hit a semicolon, and then I'm going to run it. And what I'm going to want to see is two logs of groups of 50. So you can see this is working exactly as intended, where we're getting groups of 50, and then you can see we're getting 51 all the way up to 65. That's because I changed my parameters. I'm going to go back up top here, and I'm going to change this amount. You don't have to. I'm going to change this to 400 just so that we can get like super big with this. Again, if you're using a free version of Google Drive, you only have the ability to send emails to 100 addresses. I think that's all day. Like, I don't think that's limited to one script. So be very careful about using this if you do have production level code that you need to use. So I'm going to run this again. And now you can see like it's working exactly as we want it to. We are getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. You see it, right? It's all in increments of 50 in here, where the first value starts with a 1 and the last value starts with a 0. So we're getting 301 to 350, 351 to 400. Great. So basically what would happen is if I was working within a business account, I would be sending the same email to these groups. So all of these email addresses would be on one group. This would be another group, but I wouldn't have to individually send all the emails. So if you need 400 people on your mailing list, unfortunately, I don't know how to do that because it is maxed out at 50. But this is one workaround so that you have a single script that will just run and will send out the email to as many people as you want it to within the quota limitations. So I am going to decrease this down to 70, and then I'm actually going to send an email. So I'm going to remove logger.log because I don't need it. And then I am going to reference Gmail app.send capital E email. Now, again, I would not recommend sending this out to production code until you're ready. So just be careful. Make sure that your logging is doing exactly what we just saw there, because I don't want you wasting emails or sending emails incorrectly and it's just not doing what you want it to. So we're going to hit enter. I'm going to hit escape so you can actually see my screen. And we are now going to reference email array square bracket I. We're going to go to the right. We're going to hit comma. We're going to hit enter. And this is where you enter in your subject. So I'm going to say, this is an email sent to group number space. I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to use plus sign, and I'm going to enter an I. I'm going to add in a comma, hit enter, and then the message is going to be like, excellent. This video was a success. So I'm going to add parentheses question mark because I don't actually know if it is yet. So what's happening here is when you're sending when you're sending email to more than one address, it needs to be structured in this way so that it's a comma separated array values, I think. So that's what's happening here is email array square bracket I, or whatever your variable is going to establish the mailing list or the emails that you want to send emails to. The second line here is establishing your subject line. So the reason that I'm doing this is an email sent to group number plus I is because I want it to be clear when we go to my email that like what number email address we are delivering the email to. So the third thing is going to be the body of our email address. So when we open up the email, that's what this is going to say. So without further ado, I'm going to hit run. I'm going to cross my fingers, and we're going to hit review permissions. So we're going to have a little bit more attention to see if this works or not. We're going to select our account. We're going to go to advanced. This is this is just saying Google hasn't verified the app. It's totally fine. It's just saying that it's letting you do a lot of things with Gmail. So if you don't know who wrote this app, think about if you want to send it. Cool. So we see that it started and it completed. So I'm going to open up my email, and you can already see I've gotten 3 emails. So that's a pretty good indication that this worked. And yeah, you can see here the first one is just the security alert from Google saying that I gave access to an application. And then you can see this is an email sent to group number 0 because, again, loops are 0 indexed natively. So you can see, excellent, this video was a success with the parentheses. And when we open this up down here, you can see that this email was sent to email addresses 1 through 50. I'm going to delete it because I don't need it anymore. And then you can see our second email here, which is technically group 1, was set to email addresses 51 through 70, which is the exact amount that we built out in our email alias array. Cool. So I hope you found this helpful. I apologize that this isn't going to solve all the issues, related to wanting to write applications that send email using Google Apps Script. They're just out of our control. If you do have a solution for sending more than 50 emails to, if you have a solution to sending email to more than 50 addresses at a time, please leave it in the comments. I think that my email videos are probably the most used email or videos that I've recorded. So I think there's a lot of interest around this. Additionally, we do have limitations with quotas, right? So as I outlined in here, dependent upon the version that you have in here, whether it's Workspace or the free edition, you are going to be limited on the amount of email recipients per day. So again, there's nothing, I'm not aware of how to get around this. I'm sure there are really talented people that have figured out ways to manage this. If you are one of those people, please reach out, leave a comment, because a lot of people would like to know about this information. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, reach out in the comments section. Feel free to send me an email. You obviously have my email address. Please don't send me emails from this. So if you're working on this, use your email address. Send me questions, send me comments. I love hearing from you. If you want to learn more about sending email, I have a bunch of videos on my channel page. It's in a playlist, so you can go through it, where I talk about, sending things on BCC, sending things on CC, all that type of stuff using Google Apps Script. So yeah, like I said, I hope this is helpful, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.